Today I have quite the tale to share. It involves a Karen who decided to sue me because I wouldn't let her use my pool, claiming I was discriminating against her. Let's jump right into it. So, about 20 years ago, I made the move to Panama for work. I was part of a global company, and my supervisor believed I'd be a good fit for a managerial role at our Panama office. My bilingual background from growing up in a mixed household helped me stand out, which definitely played in my favor. Before I took the plunge, my supervisor took me on a visit to explore what life could be like there. I fell in love with the country, and the ease of communication made things a breeze. Within a year, I was all set to move. It was a big step, especially since I was single and trying to manage living in New York City, which was no easy feat. Packing up and leaving, the States felt manageable, but after experiencing life in Panama, I was excited about making it my home. I landed my new managerial position and rented an apartment with hopes of eventually buying my own house. The rent was a fraction of what I was paying in New York, which allowed me to save quickly on my new salary. It took me nearly 5 years to save enough for exactly what I wanted. The idea of finally owning my own place was incredibly satisfying. I was looking for a home that wasn't too far from the office, but also avoided the hustle and bustle of city life I had experienced. Enough of that in New York. I found the perfect balance in a suburban neighborhood that kept me away from the city's traffic and chaos. There were smaller shops nearby for convenience, and the area was lovely. The property I ended up purchasing wasn't the biggest, but it featured an in-ground pool that immediately caught my eye when I saw the listing. After years of hard work, it felt like a tangible reward for my efforts. This house was the ideal first home for me. Sorry to my previous apartments. But this place truly felt like home. Just the right size for one, without too much upkeep. And by the way, I apologize if I'm talking a bit too fast today. I might have had one too many cups of coffee. Anyway, now that you have some background on me, let's get to the reason I'm sharing this here today. The neighborhood I moved into was quite different from the apartment I had called home for 5 years, so getting to know my new neighbors was part of the adventure. Initially, a few folks seemed a bit suspicious of me. I'm white passing and a woman living alone. However, once I started speaking Spanish, their demeanor shifted and they became much more friendly. In a way, my front yard became a social hub. It was spacious enough that dog walkers would often bring their pets to do their business, and sometimes I would be out front tending to my flower beds, leading to spontaneous conversations. As long as everyone cleaned up after their dogs, I didn't mind their presence. Then one day everything changed when I met her, on a lovely, breezy afternoon. I had plans to enjoy my pool later, so I decided to tackle a bit of landscaping along the walkway leading to my front door, dressed in a swimsuit and pants for the occasion. Several neighbors and dog walkers stopped to say hello, even complimenting my work on sprucing up the place. I intended to hire a professional to assess the need for exterior renovations, but I wanted to do my part in brightening it up with some plants first. Having never had a garden growing up, this was my chance to learn. I wasn't sure if I had a green thumb or was simply inspired by the countless Pinterest boards I had browsed, but I was eager to give it a shot. I was halfway through covering the roots of a peacock flower with soil when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. Turned around to find a woman standing on my lawn. The absence of a dog was the first thing that struck me as odd, especially since she was so close to my front door. "Hello, can I help you?" I asked, slightly taken aback. She responded in Spanish, seemingly annoyed, raising an eyebrow at the sight of me. "What kind of woman are you?" I shot back in Spanish. "A woman who's ready to call someone if you don't get off my property." "I'm just trying to be neighborly," she replied in Spanish, her tone infusing the moment with an uncomfortable tension. "You should learn some manners, young lady." That exchange was undoubtedly strange and left a lasting impression. For better or worse, this woman, I'll refer to her as Karen from now on, had a reputation in our neighborhood even before I arrived. Karen was an older lady with very traditional views who took it upon herself to vocally police those she deemed inappropriate. Whether it was women in swimsuits or unsupervised kids playing on their own lawns, she had no qualms about sharing her opinions. A few neighbors expressed their concern for me, knowing I was younger and lived alone, fearing that Karen would single me out for some petty reason. She had a reputation for leveraging her age and long-standing presence in the neighborhood to intimidate newer residents. From our initial encounter, it was evident that she was eager to retaliate against me. My only basis for her animosity was her disapproval of my swimsuit, which led me to believe that spending more time in my pool might be a prudent choice. I reasoned that if she observed me in a more suitable setting, she might abandon her judgments regarding my attire. The subsequent weeks turned out to be the most peculiar and stressful of my life. Approximately 2 weeks after Karen confronted me on my lawn, I found myself enjoying a swim in my pool. The pool area is enclosed by a substantial metal fence, allowing visibility while preventing entry due to a lock positioned on the side facing the pool. To enhance security, I opted to install an additional manual lock. While I was unwinding in the water, I noticed some movement near the fence. From my vantage point, I initially assumed it was a curious animal, a common occurrence in the city where various creatures often wander into yards. However, I soon heard the sound of my lock being rattled against the fence. I exited the pool and discovered Karen standing there, accompanied by 3 unfamiliar individuals. I addressed her, asking if there was a problem. Karen demanded entry, insisting that we should be allowed to use the pool immediately. I thought it was a joke and smiled, but this only prompted Karen to attempt to force her arm through the gaps in the fence to reach the lock. Although I was reluctant to engage physically, I grasped the lock to prevent her from accessing it. Karen expressed her belief that it was her right to utilize the pool, questioning my authority to deny her access. I responded by asserting that the pool is situated on my property, thus it is not hers to use at will. She suggested that it would be neighborly to share the pool, to which I countered that it would also be neighborly for her to respect my boundaries. Her sense of entitlement seemed to stem from her privileged position, leading her to believe she could dictate my actions. I resolved to demonstrate my stance. Initially, I dismissed her threats as mere bluster. However, a few days later, I received a court summons accompanied by a lawsuit. Karen alleged that I was discriminating against her and her family, who had accompanied her during her attempt to access the pool area. She accused me of racism, claiming that I allowed other neighborhood residents to use my pool while denying her access due to her darker skin tone. The accusation struck me as absurd, and I suspected it might be a prank orchestrated by someone in the neighborhood. Nevertheless, the legal documents were legitimate, necessitating a conversation with a court representative to ensure I had adequate legal counsel. I ultimately decided to hire a lawyer as a precaution and provided them with all relevant evidence to substantiate my claim that the pool was not a community resource but rather my private property. My attorney conducted their own investigation and discovered that Karen had previously attempted to litigate against the former owners of the property over a similar issue. Her claim was not based on racial discrimination, but rather an effort to have the pool designated as a public space, rather than a private amenity belonging to the previous owners. The case was dismissed, and my lawyer was confident we could secure a similar outcome for my situation. I may have been new to the country, but I was well aware of property laws and understood that, as a foreigner without citizenship, my house was still my own. The trial itself went smoothly. Both my lawyer and I were well prepared. Even with Karen attempting to tarnish my reputation during her arguments, it wasn't enough to sway the judge. I presented the deed to my house and provided surveyor documents proving that the pool was included in my property. It only took a hint that Karen had previously attempted to access my property for the judge to rule in my favor. I decided to have her cover my legal fees as well as offer compensation. I wasn't after a financial windfall. I just wanted to be vindicated. Karen did end up paying for my lawyer, and the neighborhood quickly caught wind of her antics. It didn't take long for her and her family to pack up and leave, as no one wanted them around anymore. Now I can enjoy my home and my pool in peace without any concerns about dealing with Karen again. And honestly, if you're buying a pool anywhere, it should come with a warning about being a magnet for Karens. It's just ridiculous in a couple. Moving on, the next topic is, am I the a-hole for closing my doors to a friend visiting from out of town? By the way, if you've stuck around this long, please drop some star emojis in the comments. That would really make my day. So, I'm a 35-year-old woman living with my 2 indoor dogs in a 3-bedroom house. My brother uses one of the spare bedrooms occasionally. In a couple of weeks, an old family friend and his wife, along with their 3 kids, will be visiting and asked if they could stay with me since I have the space. Initially, I had to say no, explaining that I don't have guest bedrooms available. One is a dedicated office, and the other is my brother's personal space, filled with his belongings. They insisted on staying anyway, suggesting they could sleep in my living room and bring an inflatable mattress. I had to decline again, noting that my dog's crates are in the nearby dining room and they wouldn't be comfortable with strangers. So close. Plus, I wake up at 6 a.m. every day to take care of them. They were upset, claiming that I've always been welcome at their home, although I've never actually stayed there myself, and they said it hurt their feelings. I've seen some comments from friends suggesting that I should have let everyone stay and that I'm being selfish for not moving my dog crates to another room. They think adjusting my routine for just 3 days wouldn't be a big deal. One person even called this whole situation ridiculous. Honestly, I've never met anyone so shameless as to invite themselves over, argue when I say no, and then try to turn my friends against me. What really gets to me is that these friends I thought were supportive ended up siding with the rude guests. It makes me wonder what kind of people I'm hanging out with. Either they treat me like a doormat or this type of behavior is just par for the course in my social circle. It's really disappointing. I mentioned to OP that it feels like my friends expect me to be the same accommodating person I was before everything changed post-pandemic. I used to host often, but now things are different for me, and I guess they haven't adjusted their expectations accordingly. Maybe they're right. It seems like none of them truly respect me. One commenter made a good point. Are your spaces kid-proof? If not, I should definitely mention that my place isn't safe for kids, which is a legitimate concern. Plus, my dogs need their routine. I don't have kids. I'm fine with them, but I don't want them in my space. Any pets I have will always come first. If people think I'm terrible for not hosting, they're welcome to host the family themselves. It's my space, and I get to decide who comes in. I hadn't even considered the kid aspect. My focus was mainly on my dogs, but I appreciate that tip. Another commenter asked why the friends who are calling me selfish aren't accommodating the family, and I found out they're in a similar situation, with limited space and kids of their own. In their eyes, I guess their reasons are more valid. Overall, it seems most agree I'm not at fault. Thanks for taking the time to read and share your thoughts. While I was going through those reflections, tears kept streaming down my face. Part of it stemmed from a sense of shame. I've often felt like a pushover, letting others walk all over me. Anxiety and depression have been long-term struggles for me, and just the thought of confrontation sends me spiraling. As a result, I often give in to things I'd rather avoid, like going out or hosting gatherings. Through this process, I've realized that some friends from my original circle aren't the right fit for my life anymore. I've started to distance myself from them. We've all changed over the years, and I feel like I've outgrown certain relationships. Now, about the unwanted guests. My friend group decided to assist some people with their hotel stay during their visit. These folks moved away years ago and are back mainly for a vacation to reconnect. I chose to step back from this entire situation, letting them know I had other plans that weekend and expressing my discomfort with how everything was managed. They were surprised by my decision, but I think I'm ready to move on from that chapter. And now, on to another topic. Being blind involves much more than simply lacking the ability to see. There are various levels of blindness, each requiring different care and support. With some individuals, there may be partial or low vision. Others might experience complete blindness, meaning they can't perceive any light at all. Then there's congenital blindness, which is present at birth, and legal blindness, defined as having a vision of 20 out of 200 in the best seeing eye. Nutritional blindness can occur from a deficiency in vitamin A. It's important to note that only one category represents total blindness. Others still offer some degree of sight. My son, for example, was born with congenital blindness. While he came into the world like any other baby, his eyesight never developed. He sees the world as a 1-month-old would, able to sense shadows and shapes but needing things to be very close in order to recognize details. I remember when he was about 9 years old, he described his vision as if someone had dimmed the lights in the middle of a foggy night. He never complained or seemed upset about missing out on experiences that other kids enjoy. When he turned 10, we got him his very own guide dog, giving him a newfound sense of freedom. Before that, he always needed to hold onto my hand or his father's when we went out. We tried using a stick for a while, but it didn't work out. He didn't like carrying it around, swinging it, and worrying about bumping into others. So, we enrolled him in a guide dog program, and after a thorough evaluation, he found his match. He spent several months at the training center, bonding with the puppies there. One puppy stood out, a black Labrador named Clover. Each time my son visited, Clover was always the first to greet him, and their connection was instant, as if they were meant to be together. 6 months later, Clover came home with us. However, we soon discovered the challenges that came with having a guide dog. The issues didn't stem from Clover or my son, but rather the reactions of others. Many people don't understand that guide. Dogs are not typical pets. You can't just approach a guide dog and start petting or playing with them. They're highly trained service animals, and any unnecessary attention can disrupt their training. Most people respect this and admire Clover from a distance, but some react negatively when we explain why they can't pet her. This is especially true for young children, who often want to interact with the cute puppy. More than once, I've seen a child brought to tears when I have to say no. It's tough, and I always feel awful, but it's important to remember that Clover is a service animal, not just a pet. The most challenging moment came a few years later as my son approached his 15th birthday. Thanks to Clover, he could go out more freely, meet friends, and enjoy experiences that many kids take for granted. We even had a family barbecue at the local park. During the gathering, my son and his cousins played a twist on Blind Man's Buff. The other kids would scatter, and with Clover's help, my son would track them down. They didn't stray far, often, hiding among a cluster of trees, giggling and playing, and his joy was a sight to behold. It started as a lovely day, but everything changed one afternoon when one of my nieces ran up to me, alarmed, saying that a woman was being rude to my son. Concerned, I rushed over to see what was happening. Sure enough, there was a woman, let's just call her a Karen, along with her child, berating my son while his cousins tried to protect him from the angry outburst. When I got there, the woman had calmed down slightly and informed me that my son had refused to let her son pet his dog. She made a few claims, saying my son was blind and that Clover, our dog, was a service animal. I quickly corrected her, explaining that my son is indeed blind and that no one should fuss over his guide dog. The look on her face was something else. She seemed to be struggling to process what I was saying. "He's not blind," she insisted, pointing out that she had seen my son looking at his phone. Now, I should clarify, my son is not completely blind. His vision is similar to that of a newborn, but I doubted that Karen would grasp that distinction, especially since she didn't give me a chance to explain. She claimed her mother was blind and therefore knew what blindness looked like, but from my perspective, it seemed she misunderstood. My son's eyes are clear, certainly not the cloudy sight often associated with certain types of blindness, like cataracts. I got the impression that Karen wasn't really interested in listening, though. Interestingly, her son seemed to understand the situation better than she did. He appeared younger than my son and had lost his desire to pet the dog. Still, Karen was unwilling to back down. Each time I tried to clarify my son's condition, she would interrupt and practically shout over me. This back and forth lasted for about 5 minutes before things took an unexpected turn. In a shocking move, Karen yanked Clover out of my son's hands and stomped off across the park, exclaiming that my son didn't deserve such a cute dog and accusing us of being terrible owners. I was left stunned. My son began to cry, and it took a moment for me to collect myself and spring into action. Fuming, I ran after her, only to see her mistreating my dog when he became upset. When she flatly refused to return Clover, I reacted in anger and slapped her across the face, hard enough that I wouldn't be surprised if my handprint is still visible on her cheek. I took Clover back to my son, and though the mood was dampened for a while, after an hour we were all laughing together, turning the whole ordeal into quite the story. That is, until the police arrived. They pulled me aside to ask questions because Karen had reported me for assault. I was definitely concerned, having consumed all those burgers, hot dogs, and chickens. I felt like I might end up regretting it. Thankfully, when I brought up the fact that Karen had attempted to steal my son's guide dog, the situation took a turn for the better. They were understanding and took my statement promptly, allowing me to return to the barbecue, which became quite the focal point. Fast forward a few weeks, and now I'm expected to stand in court. During that period, I received messages from families saying the police had reached out for statements and witness accounts. I felt a mix of anxiety and confidence about what had happened. Many suggested that I shouldn't have hit Karen, but when the court hearing commenced, the judge got straight to the point, asking if it were true that Karen had tried to steal my son's guide dog. I replied, "Yes, Your Honor." And that was pretty much it. As a result, Karen faced prison time for attempting to steal and injuring the dog. Pet theft is a serious matter in the UK, and now Karen has to attend a mandatory sensitivity seminar for her actions towards a blind child. I couldn't quite read her expression when she left the courtroom. Whether she was upset, angry, or just stunned was anyone's guess. Now, before we wrap up this video, let's dive into a funny story from Petty Revenge titled, "You Don't Want to Pay? Well, I'll hold your laundry hostage." So, picture this. I'm a 44-year-old man, and I own a small business, specifically a pickup and delivery laundry service in a bustling city. Most of our clientele consists of small salons, bars, and restaurants, as we provide flexibility without any long contracts. It's pretty straightforward. If you like us, call us. If not, don't. When we were new to the game, we were thrilled to take on the tablecloths and napkins of a Michelin 2-star restaurant. The finance guy, M, was a piece of work, always trying to haggle our rates down, but we had a great rapport with A, the logistics guru of the restaurant. Every high-end establishment should have someone like her on their team. We bent over backward to meet their needs, even leasing extra space to handle their business, bringing in $3,000 a month made, them our largest customer. The catch? M had already struck a solid deal when we began, yet he had a nasty habit of negotiating down our prices once money was owed. We repeatedly informed A that this was unacceptable. Sure, M was an owner, but he was the financial type, while the chef and other owners genuinely cared about the business. After months of back and forth and persistent requests for discounts, we remained firm and refused to budge, especially since we were already extending considerable discounts to them. And honestly, for $400 a plate, you'd think they wouldn't sweat the $2 a tablecloth or whatever we charged. But M started pressing us hard, withholding around $1,700, which was money we desperately needed, while he tried to force us to accept a lower payment. I think he assumed we were scraping by like most small business owners, but really, we were just worn out, sick and tired of the whole situation. We checked our balance of patience and found zero left. So I hatched a plan, got my partner on board, and once the weekend rolled around, we were ready. We had nearly all of their laundry. You might be able to guess what happened next. I called A and told her that M could shove it. "We have all your laundry pressed and ready for you. It's Monday and you're aiming to reopen on Tuesday. You want your laundry back? Pay us in full for this order and everything you owe from previous orders, and do it in cash." And I also made it clear that once we got our payment, our business relationship would be over. Financially, it was a tough decision, but starving wasn't an option for us. A understood and was actually on our side. She appreciated our service. She informed all the other owners that we meant business, and soon enough, she called me back to agree on a time to settle things. I headed to the restaurant, leaving my partner and the laundry in the van. In my line of work, I've dealt with all sorts of shady characters while making deliveries, so I knew how to handle deadbeats. But M wasn't around. The chef, the other owner, was. Since it was him and not M dealing with me, I allowed a check instead of insisting on cash. It cleared without a hitch, and once I got that, I called my partner to bring the laundry inside. A reached out later, suggesting we keep working together without having to deal with M. To be honest, it felt like a huge relief not having to engage with them anymore, but I declined the offer. You don't shortchange a small business that's essential for your fancy restaurant pulling in $20,000 worth of seating when you don't have a backup plan. I have no regrets about it. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do, and I'll catch you tomorrow.